assumptions were gathered from the consultant's review of the current state of Montreat and the public engagement. So it's the same amount, it's the same information. So.
Okay, thanks. I will, maybe at a future meeting, I'll come in with some suggested alternatives, or maybe between.
Yeah, I mean, these aren't binding. These are just the notes that I came up with.
Right.
And essentially what it's showing is a lot of the same concerns are still relevant today.
Oh, without question. I
Yeah.
understand that. And I appreciate you're doing that for me and for
Absolutely.
us.
Yeah.
I just have some other thoughts. I don't think this is the only place in the document that it describes Montreat in 2008. And
Mhm.
so I want to go and look at some of that other language.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that section 2 is the main area that we would pull kind of those assumptions from. But yeah, I definitely welcome any other thoughts y'all have. But the one thing I will say is that we're talking about today.
Yeah.
So, you know, the things that are that were the assumptions in 2008 are definitely an important part of it. But, you know, let's make sure that what we are using for the 2023 plan is, it encapsulates what the concerns are.
That's exactly what I want to do.
So, yeah.
Kayla, can I make a comment?
Mhm.
So number 2 for the 2023 plan says housing is expensive in Montreat, but there's no follow on. I mean, what is the impact of that?
It's just an assumption. It's something that the town is facing. So the solution, whatever that may look like, is what we would find in the objectives.
Well, when I look at our recommendations, I don't see anything that's related to housing is expensive and what we're going to do about that.
Yeah.
So I don't think it needs to go in there.
Well, honest to goodness, I don't think there's anything we can do about it.
Yeah.
So
People
why
are
put
not
it in
going to
there?
accept mobile homes. They're not going to accept low rent housing or subsidized housing. I mean, that's just from talking to people in the community and what they want. So
Now, I can say that objective development 4, explore increasing flexibility in the zoning ordinance for accessory dwelling units, may touch on that a little bit, because accessory dwelling units, and we'll talk more about accessory dwelling units when we get into the objectives. Accessory dwelling units can be a way to increase housing options, which would alleviate some of that housing is expensive assumption or concern.
is that like garage units and things of that nature? Or
Yeah,
accessory?
yeah, they're smaller. It's not a second home on a lot. It's typically like a studio that someone could use if their family's coming into town, or if there's a student. Generally rented, yeah.
Those are home ownership, not rented out.
They can. I mean, they would be owned by whoever owns the property, but they could be rented out. That's definitely a possibility.
Right.
But we can talk more about those after. So there are some in here that don't talk about things like subsidized housing, mobile homes, things like that, but other ways of maybe providing a bigger, more wide ranging housing choice. So, but we can talk about that a little bit later, because I know that's going to be a big point of discussion. So but yeah, so what I'm trying to say is that housing affordability doesn't necessarily mean just housing price. It can also mean housing type too. But again, we'll talk about that when we get to that objective, because I know that's going to be a really big topic, and I want to focus us as we go through this. So Josh, can you pull up, if you go in that presentation folder and the draft vision statement objectives, if you can open that PDF, and so we can see it on the screen, and focus on environment 1 in that voting table. Okay. Josh, can you zoom in? Zoom out a little. Okay, now go up a little. Down. Down some more. Okay. All right. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through each objective. We're gonna try to focus on the ones that y'all had questions about, ones where people maybe felt like they didn't have enough information to accurately vote on it, and the ones that have do not support or strongly do not support votes, okay? So let's start with the first one. Environment 1, update the Montreat zoning ordinance to require fire safe regulations for any new multifamily residential development or non-residential development. I asked the consultants what fire-wise, fire safe meant. And the response I got was that they weren't trying to refer to any program, but that rather fire safe was used as an adjective to indicate regulations that could be adopted to reduce the risk of fires. So, you know, I'll leave you guys to discuss that. And, you know, do you guys like this objective? Do you not like this objective?
Is
Yeah,
this above the building codes?
yeah. This would be, I mean, yeah, this would be in addition to what we already have now. This would be something new.
It would be to strengthen the current code
Mhm.
for non-residential and multifamily residential development.
Yeah, and I know that the state limits the way that single family dwellings and development can be governed by like fire safety. So it's definitely something we'd have to look into as far as including like residential, single family residential development, but certainly for multifamily residential development and non-residential development, it seems to be feasible in terms of the state legislation.
Does this mean that there are no fire regulations for multifamily residential development in Montreat?
There are. So what this is saying is that in addition to,
So what's missing?
It's,
What's
it's,
the
let me-
problem this
Let
is
me
solving?
interject. It's a lot like years ago, they allowed aluminum wiring in housing. But then they discovered that aluminum wiring in housing is not good. So they started using copper more and outlawing aluminum wiring. So as the new regulations come along, then we can incorporate those because aluminum in wiring used to be a fire hazard and they discovered it. So as the building regs change and are improved, then it's given us an opportunity to adopt those is all it's saying, really, isn't it?
I think that may be part of it, but I believe the consultants were focusing on outdoor fire safety. So 2 examples that they gave were clear zones and debris removal. I know places in California that are really vulnerable to wildfires have regulations about you know, how far you have to clear and maintain things from your dwelling to prevent like the buildup of debris that could catch on fire. So maybe that's what they were getting
May
at.
well be, and we have a FireWise program going right now and continues to go.
I just have a couple comments. So I called the consultants when these were first circulated to ask more about it because I like y'all, I didn't know where it was coming from. One of the points they made, I said, why is a fire more likely to break out in a multifamily residential development or non-residential development than our residential development? That's why, if this is so important, why are we not applying it to the whole valley and just to the facilities that are principally owned by the college and the MRA? And she told me on that call that the state law actually prohibits making these requirements of single family dwellings. So you couldn't broaden this if you wanted to. And when I saw the votes, I wasn't surprised. And I made reference to this in the last meeting that we had, that this objective really does primarily only impact the college and the MRA in the town of Montreat. The church owns some property. There are a few other institutions, but primarily this does really affect institutional property. And Paul and I'll speak for Paul on this. We're not going to come out in opposition to fire safety. Okay. So, however, I felt like what we were after could be worded a little bit more broadly to give the town and its institutional representatives some leeway in interpreting the comprehensive plan as we move forward these regulations, so as not to, in moving forward, in everyone's judgment, sort of put an undue burden. So that second bullet under this was my offering. The town of Montreat should develop and encourage regulations to encourage fire safety. These regulations should be customized to fit the needs of the community, weighing carefully the impact on public safety and natural areas, as well as the likely burdens placed on property owners as such regulations are passed. It gives us a chance to be in conversation about this as elected representatives and appointed representatives, leaders in the community, to make sure that we understand this is a priority, but it doesn't update ordinances based on some other plan that might be on the website somewhere that we're required to follow.
So what does the rest of the steering committee think about that? Do you like that language? Do you like this objective? Do you guys feel like it supports the environmental vision for the
Like it.
town?
I like it.
I like it. It seems to me that it's focused on outdoor fire pit.
Yeah.
Outdoor fire pits.
Okay.
And community areas, which would be, the students would use, or at the lodge or whatever.
Now, what about the language specifically proposed in that bullet 2? The town of Montreat should develop regulations to encourage fire safety. These regulations should be customized to fit the needs of the community, weighing carefully the impact on public safety and natural areas, as well as the likely burdens placed on property owners as such regulations are passed.
That's
fine.
I prefer the Richard language actually, as being more general, but so my pragmatic question is, who then monitors the fire safe ordinances going forward? Kayla, does that fall to our zoning administrator? Well, who in the town?
I don't know if we'd be able to answer that yet.
Police, town manager. And we contract with the fire department to come up and do assessments of areas and building inspections. I know they inspect the college and the hotel every now and then, or go through. So, yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna take that objective, put Richard's language in there, and we'll go to the next one.
And I just wanted to let you know that the Firewise Committee offers voluntary inspections of homes and around homes that cost Montreat residents nothing. And so you can request one of those anytime.
All right, Josh, can you scroll down to environment 2? Yeah, I think that's fine. Okay.
So we're adopting Richard's suggested
Mhm.
language.
So environment 2, work with the U.S. Forestry, UNC, Montreat landowners, and other regional partners to assess Montreat's forest lands and develop management strategies to improve the forest health and resiliency. Is everybody okay with this objective? Do we like the language? Any concerns?
So again, this is 2 months ago when I wrote this. I'm having to go back and remember what I wrote and why I changed or suggested the alternative. The comment at the top of that section is one that is an alternative I proposed. But honestly, since it's been a couple of months, I can't honestly remember why I was proposing the alternative. I'd be fine with either of these. So I don't know that you might look at bullet 1 and see if you all have any reaction to it or advantages to it. I think what it does, I think what the comment that I put in, or the amendment that I put in suggests is that is a more collaborative approach between our institutions in the town to come up with management strategies for our forests. Because frankly, the vast majority of our forests, again, is on private property. So it really requires a collaborative approach more so than than a top-down approach. And
Your recommended edit also includes a funding plan.
right. A funding plan, if we're going to preserve land, how are we gonna pay for it?
Is there someone from MRA on the land care committee that you know of?
There is, off the top of my head, I can't remember who. I'm pretty sure who is anybody here on land care?
Yeah, it's just,
It's Jason Nance is on land care.
Jason,
Right.
okay.
yeah, you have two representatives.
I thought there was another,
Tracy Bailey is the
Right.
other.
right?
So, okay, so in the interest of time, that's the language right now, and then we've got Richard's proposed language in bullet 1. What do you guys want to go with?
Yeah, I'm
You
gonna
like-
suggest, I'm gonna
Yeah,
suggest.
I
it's
like
not-
the collaborative effort.
I
Bullet
support
one.
Richard's.
bullet
And it
1?
also suggests
No.
funding.
No.
Always
I'll say the issue with bullet 2 is that it puts land care in somewhat of a leadership position, and that's not really land care's provision. So I like the first bullet for what it states, and if there's a way to sort of mash in bullet number 2 to make the whole process more inclusive, but not giving land care the leadership role.
So we're saying land care should collaborate.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, we have as town employees, at least 2, maybe 3 now certified arborists too. So that's one skill set we really need as we address at least public lands. Private is a different story.
One other comment, Kayla, I'm sorry. I was just not familiar with UNC and what UNC might provide the process. I was naming the people in my bullet who are currently active in the conversation.
Yeah.
But I've got no reason to
I think-
exclude UNC.
I think stakeholders and their representatives, I don't see any issue with the language, not inviting other parties in who would benefit us. Okay, cool. So environment 3, let's go down a little bit, Josh. Okay, create a local erosion and sediment control ordinance for grading permits and requirements for projects that are currently not covered by Buncombe County's erosion and sediment control ordinance. Okay, so let me just explain the current erosion and sediment control requirements, because I know that was a comment that was mentioned that there wasn't enough information. So currently, the only way that you have to comply with the erosion and sediment control ordinance is if you are disturbing more than 1 acre of land. 1 acre of land. So very few, if any, development in Montreat has to actually have an erosion and sediment control plan, anything like that. Now, I do request that people follow the ordinance and put silt fences up and things like that, but I don't have any teeth behind that to go out and enforce that. I know building inspections, you know, I know Dan tries to, within his power, do what he can to make sure people are putting up silt fences and things like that. Yeah, the erosion and sediment control ordinance for Buncombe County is not contextual for Montreat because we have very small lot sizes.
Since you know the code better than I'll make I'll ask a question in the form of a statement. I believe that this is the opposite of number 1, and that this would primarily affect private property owners, homeowners who are doing development or redevelopment of their property. I'm thinking about our property, the MRA's property, the college's property. Most of those property are in lots and configured in such a way that they would exceed the 1 acre limit, and we would be required to do this anyway.
So it's land disturbance greater than an
Oh,
acre. It's
land
not
disturbance greater than
lot
an acre.
size,
I
it's
see.
land disturbance.
Thank
So
you.
I can
Appreciate
have 100 acres of land, but only need an acre for a home site. And if I'm under an acre, if I'm under 43,560 square feet, I'm not subject to the ordinance.
So then again, this is really going to apply primarily to Paul and to me and our institutions.
This doesn't apply to everybody.
Pardon?
This doesn't impact anyone wanting to do development in Montreat.
It doesn't affect any,
No, it will if we put objective
if we
environment
strengthen it. Right.
If we strengthen it, yeah,
Right,
because right
okay.
now it is not, this ordinance is not contextual to Montreat. Yeah. It is contextual to Buncombe County, but it's not to Montreat.
you're smiling. So
Yeah.
do you think we need this?
I do.
I mean, okay, well, then we need to.
I do.
Look at it. We need to incorporate it.
I do think that this is something that we need to explore. And I don't know if, now I will say full disclosure, I don't know if there are state statutes that limit how we can at a local level impact erosion and sediment control. But I do think that this piece, whatever we can do, we need to be doing.
So it needs to be strengthened.
Yes.
And
in
also-
whatever ways we legally can do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's very important for us to
Yeah.
incorporate something like that in this plan.
So, I mean, just from a zoning perspective, because I would be the one who'd enforce this, I am in favor of Environment 3 and the way that it's currently written. But I will leave that final decision to you guys.
What are the legal limits?
I don't have a.
Does the state in some
answer to
way,
that.
does the state give municipalities total control? Limited
would be-
control?
That would be part of the. That would be part of the objective is understanding clearly what the legal box is that we can work in.
Right.
Yes. And I don't have an answer for that and I don't want to speculate. I won't speculate.
Mhm.
So, but that exploration of what the legal boundaries are of an ordinance of this type, or even just regulations of this type would be part of implementing this objective.
Yeah, I see this as one of the most important recommendations the whole plan can make, particularly looking at the widespread community concern for a healthy flat creek. I suspect you probably would be doing the research on this, and you probably know better than I, the University of North Carolina Institute of Government and their water center and so forth. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so if, is everyone in favor of the way this is written? Does everyone feel like they have enough information to have an opinion on this?
Well, it's a hard thing to answer because I don't know I mean, are we in favor of controlling our erosion and sediment? Sure. Is the cat kind of out of the bag on that in terms of how quickly the lake has filled up with sediment over the last 15 years since the last plan was passed? Probably. In other words, relative to the last 15 years, how much development are we going to be doing over the next 15 years in Montreat is really the key question, if I understand land disturbance correctly. Right?
Yeah, it is. And the other thing the other thing that can also play a role is not just like construction of new homes, but think about road upgrades, trail construction,
Right.
recreational facility construction. We're not just talking about homes.
Right.
It's any sort of land disturbance that you do. And so even if Montreat gets totally built out, could still upgrade roads. We could still build more trails. We could still, do things that would do land disturbance. So I don't necessarily think the cat is out of the bag, especially because we are still seeing development
Is Mayor,
and redevelopment too.
Mayor, are there roads currently unpaved that are in the strategic plan for future paving?
It's the only additional paving that we're going to do, but we've got a water line to upgrade first up there. Before we can do that. And of course, we use sediment control on the entire project as
Right.
we go through it.
Roads would be under the existing law,
If,
more than 1 acre of disturbance.
yeah, if they're the part of Oklahoma we're messing with is going to be the unpaved section up where your lots begin.
Yeah.
Yeah, up in that area is where it's going to be.
Right. Oklahoma actually goes across our lots.
Yes, it does.
But again, roads really don't factor into this or this recommendation, because if you're paving Woodland Road, like was paved 10 years or so ago, I would think that would fall under, you would have to, by the Buncombe County law, use that sediment control ordinance. So it's really about smaller private development that this would expand the
I think
purpose
that
of.
would be the type of development that's most impacted. But I mean, unless I had the ordinance that was going to be adopted in front of me, I couldn't, make a
Right. So it gets
Right.
back to
Yeah.
back to your question. Are we comfortable with this language? I'm saying to the extent that it's sitting here, yes, I just think it's a continuing conversation. we have
It
to
is,
do.
it is. I mean, and any, any ordinance that's adopted will have, you go through planning and zoning commission, go before the board of commissioners. There'll be time for public comment and adjustments. We're not adopting nebulous language right now.
My
Yeah.
question is, what projects are not covered by Buncombe County's erosion and sediment ordinance?
Anything that disturbs less than 1 acre of land. So that is almost every single permit that I've done here since August has been probably every single permit that I've issued since August of last year when I started has been less than 1 acre.
Typical lot size in Montreat is 1/4 of an acre.
And we're talking about land disturbance. We're not just talking about lot size. So right now, almost probably, nothing in my experience has.
So Buncombe County's ordinance doesn't cover anything less than an acre.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's exactly right.
That seems, that's astonishing. Because most of Buncombe County is parcels of less than 1 acre like everywhere else, right?
Not,
All the residential would be.
I don't know. I don't know.
Certainly there's a large,
I don't,
there's a large number of lots in Buncombe County that would.
yeah, I don't know the history of this ordinance. I just don't think it's contextual to Montreat. So,
There's a large voting block of individuals who do not want this ordinance to apply to them in every county.
so in the interest of time, are we in favor of this? Are we not in favor of this? Are we okay with the language? Yes. I think this is okay for what we, yeah. Because this isn't dictating what's in the ordinance. This is just telling us we'd like this to happen. Okay. Josh, can you scroll down to environment 4, please? Okay, explore the adoption of additional stream protection ordinances. So right now, the only stream protection regulations is that we require a buffer of 30 feet from the stream bank of non-ephemeral streams. I don't know the legal feasibility of implementing stronger regulations. It may be possible. So I'd love to hear from the committee.
What's the problem it's trying to solve?
Protecting the streams.
Or what's the problem? What's the current problem this would solve?
When people want to build a home that is closer to a stream, now a stream is much, we have a lot of streams in Montreat. I don't know how many you've got running through the college, probably 4 or 5 that all end up in Flat Creek. A recent example might be Upper Graybeard, where someone wanted to build a lot very close to a stream. The state had to come in and look at it and determined it was what kind of a stream? Ephemeral stream.
Yeah,
Don't ask me what that means, Paul. I have no idea.
it's not, it's a stream that is only a stream during storm conditions. It's not a stream that has any biological value or holds water permanently. It's like a storm channel kind of.
I still don't understand the problem. I haven't heard anybody articulate a problem. This is solved. A new law should solve a problem. What's the problem?
Well, I can respond to that in a couple of ways. Some of you may be aware that the Montreat Land Care Committee received some external funding a few years ago to do a water quality analysis on all of Flat Creek. That information, I'm not sure it's on the Montreat Care website, but I know we presented it to the annual cottages meeting and put out like a fact sheet on that. And for the most part, the water quality in Flat Creek is extremely high. It's the kind of stream that other communities wish they had. So the concern is, what problem are we solving? One problem is simply maintaining water quality as it is. But let me just sort of draw this to a conclusion. We also had a second project that looked at bacterial loading at the swimming hole, and water was not completely clean. A couple of times the bacterial load at the swimming hole went above the health standard short term, so not a long-term issue. But the kinds of issues we're looking at preventing are so much erosion going into the creek on sort of under extreme weather events where you have high sediment load that is hazardous to wildlife. Particularly, this is a trout water. The water at certain times of the year is so clean that it helps our community to more than meet the quality standards for trout. That's quite an achievement when you compare Flat Creek to, say, the Upper Swannanoa River, where it's just been under heavy development in the Black Mountain area. We're looking at more extreme weather events coming. That means floods. That means even more sediment, Richard, running into Lake Susan, sedimenting and filling in. And at the same time, when we see some of these high volume runoffs due to more pavement, shall we say, we've lost our population of hellbender satellites because they were washed away in the Great Flood of a couple of years ago. And some of you know Josh Holbrook on the Montreat College staff, who's tried to institute nesting boxes in the creek to try to bring these critters back. So again, you know, we're looking at heading off problems since we have such a high water quality, and it's a big part of our heritage and culture in Montreat.
And if I can add to that, so we talked about the concern of erosion and sediment entering the streams from construction. An erosion and sediment control ordinance is that is the regulations for reducing the impacts of erosion and sedimentation during construction. It's our stormwater rules and stream protection rules that are post-construction regulations. So this is, in my opinion, I think goes hand in hand with Environment 3. I don't know the legal feasibility of implementing more stream regulations because the state does have specific rules, and I can't speculate as to what the limits are, but that would certainly be a part of exploring this. And I do think it does support Environment 3 and the environmental vision. I'll say that from a zoning administrator's perspective.
So I won't oppose it, but I don't see a reason for it. I'll abstain, or I won't oppose it. But Bill, your argument that the health of the stream argues in favor of not adding, you're not solving a problem, because we have a very, very healthy stream situation here in the town. That argues in favor of we don't need more laws. So I don't think you should add laws if you can't identify a clear problem. And I don't hear a clear problem.
Okay, I'll repeat again. The problem is overloading the creek with sediment at the wrong times of the year. Not only talking about water quality as in sediment, but in quantity in terms of flooding and habitat and park destruction. But I would like to add a second point, and then I'll really try to be quiet the rest of the day. As we read this language, it says explore the adoption of additional stream protection ordinances. I would suggest that the language could be broadened to add voluntary best practices. So we're not necessarily legislating continually. Paul, one of the big problems in this community is runoff from property, from driveways and from roofs. We live on Appalachian Way, and during heavy rain, we almost there's a term for sliding on the pavement. But anyway, the pavement that runs onto the street from the various roofs and driveways in our neighborhood and all Montreat neighborhoods creates a tremendous volume going into the stream. Numerous communities around this country have figured out that we can modify rainwater runoff and keep it on property. In my case, you're all welcome to see a 5-digit rain garden that we had to install back in the day when we built our program. But we know a few property owners who have voluntarily installed rain gardens on their property so that they're not contributing to the burden of runoff. So I would suggest maybe adding best practices too.
Page 8. So it talks about it there, We can definitely combine the two if the group feels that that would be more appropriate. The draft vision objectives, page 8, you're looking for environment 12.
No, development 2 and 3 on Earth.
Oh, okay. Mine has my notes in it, so I may be. Thank you. Page 6. Sorry, mine has a bunch of notes in it, so my spacing is different.
What is the one is a recommendation to explore additional regulations, and the other is to establish a voluntary
Stormwater.
voluntary
control.
program. And so one of the reasons why I'm not opposed to the first one is because the verb explore is broad enough where I feel like we can have a good conversation in public about this. I do agree with Paul. We have high quality, and yet I can understand the need to sort of make sure that we preserve it. Seems to me like the regulations in place have done a pretty good job of making sure that our water quality has remained extremely high.
Mhm.
And so I don't know that we have a need for regulations, but I'm also hearing from you, I don't know that we need to solve for that today.
Right, having the word explore leaves it open.
Yeah.
To look more at these, potentially in the future, which if you look at those assumptions, one of the assumptions that we're going off of is that Montreat may experience more hazardous weather, which may lead to more stormwater runoff, which may lead to XYZ.
Right.
So I like the idea of explore.
So to
Um,
that question about hazardous weather, that's something else. And Mayor and others who were at the town meeting where the person who did our stormwater assessment came and presented, what was the name of that company that blew something? I can't remember. They basically said you don't design a stormwater retention plan for extreme weather events because it's beyond the scope of affordability of just about every community. So we're really talking about managing for the ongoing ordinary rainfall that takes place in Montreat, knowing that every once in a while a tropical storm is going to come through here and wipe out our park, right? Okay.
So I think it warrants a conversation to explore later. Is everyone okay with leaving the language in as it is and then having objective 12 talk about a voluntary program? Yeah? Is that okay? We'll get to objective 12 in a minute, but as long as we're all okay with number 4, reading explore the adoption of additional stream protection ordinances. Okay. Moving on, number 5. Thank you, Josh. Okay. Institute periodic review by the tree board of the protected and encouraged trees list to ensure riparian species are included. I did not have a chance to reach out to the tree board to see if they are doing this. They are? Okay.
Yeah, we got a grant a year or so ago to inventory the trees from the gate up to probably Virginia or just below the ball field. And we took out 30-something diseased trees. We know what trees are there, and the inventory is going to have to be, we're going to have to get another grant or allocate the money to continue those inspections and so forth. So we'll continue on that.
So I reached out to the consultants about this, and they said that the intent of this objective is to document and support the work the tree board is doing. We think it's important to memorialize the good practices that the town is doing. Is that okay with everybody to leave that in? Anyone have any issues with that one? Okay. Environment 6. We took this one out from our last meeting. Y'all remember that? Richard, I see. Do you remember that? Okay. All right. Environment 7, we talked about this one last time, and we had agreed on some alternative language, which is to explore conservation easements as an avenue for land protection in lieu of what is written there. Is everybody still okay with that? In lieu of the language that's currently proposed for environment 7, explore conservation easements as an avenue for land protection.
Sounds good.
Good. Okay. All right. Environment 8. All right. implement the stormwater management plan as required and approved by small MS4 and PDES permit. So I just want to give you guys a little bit of background about what the MS4 plan is. So MS4 entities implement measures within their jurisdictions to prevent and control stormwater pollution from developed areas. The purpose of the stormwater management plan, which we are currently waiting to be adopted by the state, reviewed and adopted, is to establish and define the means by which the town will comply with its NPDES municipal separate storm sewer system permit to meet the federal standard of reducing pollutants. Essentially, what this plan does is just let us regulate stormwater. And I spoke to Mary Roderick, who is handling the towns. She's with Land of Sky, like I am. She said that I asked her about this objective, and she said that it would be good to keep it in the plan because then it kind of reminds the town that it's there and that we need to implement it. So it's really just an action of implementing the plan, but that she recommended that it stay in there.
If we do that, can we put something in the plan to explain what MS4 NPDES is? And maybe a couple of sentences summarizing what you said about it. So when you pick up the plan, you know what. Yes, ma'am.
I can certainly make that suggestion. Anyone else? Okay. Okay, cool. All right, environment 9, we talked about, I think we talked about removing this one last time because we wanted to put, was that right? Maybe not. Should I take it out? So let's talk about environment 9. Create a funding mechanism to ensure compliance with small MS4 NPDES permit. I will leave that to the mayor to maybe start us off.
The most common funding mechanism is a rain tax, as people call it. It's based on the surfaces on your property, your roof, your driveway, those surfaces that do not absorb water and therefore shed water in some manner. And you are taxed based on the size of the roof and the driveway and so forth.
I have some big roofs, so I have some questions. So, not to mention a few parking lots. So, I want to understand how at number 8, Kayla, and number 9 interact with each other. Well, the reason why number eight reads as if and your comments from Mary indicate to me, and maybe I'm wrong, is that we basically need to do that whether we put it in the plan or not.
Mhm.
So if we have to do something that requires funding by state mandate, then we really need number 9. In other words, if we have to do something as a town that is going to cost the town something, it's going to have to come with a funding plan, whether that's through property taxes or a rain tax or some other form fee structure to cover whatever is required of us in number 8, right?
Yeah. The only thing I would say is that this to me feels more like an implementation strategy than an actual goal. And I know we talked about implementation and the strategies and how funding would be a big part of that. So my inclination is to move this out of objectives and put it under the implementation strategy.
Under
Agreed.
number 8.
No,
No,
number
number
8
nine.
would stay, but number 9 is implementation.
I say, but it would implementation of number 8. In other words, it's a function of number 8.
Yeah, it is. Yes, yes.
I would just note that it does seem like several of these are directly going to increase taxes on the residents of Montreat. So, you know, as we walk through these continually, I would just note that there are tax increases in what we're doing here.
Paul, I agree, but it's going to be up to the council in the long run to decide after we come up with a plan, what the town from year to year can afford to do. And typically the town commissioners do a board retreat where they go over the entire plan and decide what they want to try to implement in that coming year. And a lot of times people ask, well, why were some of the 2008 plans objectives never met or done? And it's simply because the town couldn't afford them. And the commissioners do not like to raise taxes or add taxes. The rain tax would be a very debatable type thing with the town council. And it would be, have a great impact on everyone, including you and me. Every one of us sitting at this table, it would have a tremendous impact. So I don't know where it would go, but the council is going to have to debate it and decide in the future what they're going to do about the funding of some of these projects.
Well, and again, to the point, we won't have a choice if we are required by state law to update our stormwater plan, right? And then we'll have to decide how that gets paid for, whether it be through grant funding or tax increases, fee structures, rain tax, whatever, right? So
Right.
those are bridges that have to be crossed down the road, assuming we are required to upgrade the plan. So I don't see any way around.
I understand, Richard. And yes, the council is very aware and very in tune with stormwater in the future. I mean,
But also-
that's one of the topics that we have talked about, and we know we're going to have to approach over the next 2 to 5 years.
Well, didn't the recent, I don't want to contradict what you just said, but didn't the recent audit of our stormwater facilities say we're in pretty good shape?
So on that note, Josh, can we go to environment 10? Okay, so this says create a stormwater infrastructure plan to inform long-term capital project development and funding. I have an idea for some revised language for this one, but I want to let you guys talk about it first.
My question would be, who would do this? Who would create this plan?
The town would do this in conjunction with Land of Skies and Advisor, and based on state regulations.
Well,
Isn't
that's,
that-
sorry, John.
I would just think, well, doesn't that happen anyway? Isn't it going to happen anyway?
You never know what the state's going to do. Some years they leave things like that alone, and then other years they really change the laws and so forth and increase them. So I don't know. It's a roll of the dice, John. I don't know which way they'll go. But we're going to pay attention to the storm water in Montreat over the next several years with things that we can do as a town and can afford. That may involve curbing and guttering in places and some erosion control in other places and so forth. So I don't know.
So a case where I think Montreat may not be exactly like every municipality, according to the stormwater study that was done, one of the most, if not the most important stormwater facility we have in Montreat is Lake Susan. And so as an example of this kind of collaborative work, we're going to have to make Lake Susan deeper at some point over the next 4 or 5 years. Right now, it's holding maybe a third to a fourth of the water that the dam is designed to hold, which is endangering the population of trout that we can keep in the lake for summer recreation and for wildlife, because the shallower the water gets, the hotter it gets, and the less water you have to sustain wildlife in the lake. I'll keep my comments about the geese out of this for the time being. The bottom line is we need to dredge the lake. And so we've been in conversation with a couple members of the town council. Town staff's been working with us. We've been talking with state legislators about the possibility of applying for public funding to help us do that. So that's just an example of where we're a little bit different perhaps than some municipalities, in the sense that that facility is all on private property, but the town has a real interest in seeing us be able to carry out that project. So stay tuned. I'm really interested to hear about your revised language.
I really try to keep my opinions to myself. I really just want to be here to support you guys, but I did have an idea for this one. I don't really know if this needs to be a formalized plan. I suggest maybe changing the language to inventory the town's current stormwater infrastructure and identify opportunities for system improvements and expansions. And we can include in there You know, the towns, the MRAs, the colleges, we could include additional properties because Lake Susan is obviously a really big one. We could include those in there as well.
I support your edited.
I think it's a great edit.
Yeah. And adding in MRA and the colleges in there as well. I mean, or just the towns, I don't know.
I wouldn't name individual
Okay.
entities.
Okay. Everyone's good with that? Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's go to 11, Josh, please. Thank you. Work with regional and local partners to hold educational workshops on stormwater management best practices for private property. Oh, wait, hang on. Sorry. I made a bunch of notes in here, and so I'm trying to remember what I wrote and what was actually written. Work with regional and local partners to hold workshops on stream bank management and restoration for private property owners. Example, live staking and riparian zone management, and to teach property owners how to install stormwater control members on their property to reduce runoff. Do we like this one? What do we think?
I like it, support it. Seems more like an implementation strategy or implementation than it falls under some of these other goals.
Mhm.
I mean, it would fall under 12, for example.
We could expand 12 to include education. And then have working with regional and local partners to hold some of these workshops as an implementation strategy. So what does the group think about taking number 11 and taking the educational portion of it and adding it to objective 12 to read something like create a voluntary stormwater control measure and education program for private property owners, ... And then take the rest of environment 11, which talks about working with regional and local partners to hold these workshops, and take that portion and put it in implementation. Does
I
that
like
make
it.
sense to everybody? I know that was kind of complicated. Okay. All right. So let me just make a note of that. Okay. All right. So environment 11. This one reads, create a voluntary stormwater control measure program with established goals, example, 5 new SCMs per year. So we just talked about adding the education component into this language. One of the comments, it was bullet 2.5 may be ambitious. I agree with that. So maybe taking out that example would be a good idea. Create a voluntary stormwater control measure program with established goals. Example, 5 new SCMs per year. So we need to add in something about education. And maybe it says,
Are you suggesting eliminate the parenthetical language?
I think so.
Okay, with that.
And maybe add in create a voluntary stormwater control measure program with educational workshops. Something of that nature.
This is great, and I should mention that last year Montreat Land Care held a forum on stormwaters with Mary Roderick from Land of Sky who came, and she outlined the stormwater management plan that was in formulation at the time. And Kelly, you'd help me on the 6 elements, but a couple of them relate to education. So this dovetails into exactly what the state's requiring us to do. And it's pretty harmless in terms of implementing voluntary best practices with citizens, property owners, really wanting the guidance that this could offer.
Yeah, and I think having it formalized in a plan is a good, when we look at this plan in 10, 15 years, this will be one we can say, give it a big check mark, which is good. Okay, so are we okay with create a voluntary stormwater control measure program with educational workshops? Oh, that doesn't read right. Create a voluntary stormwater control measure program, including educational workshops with established goals. That doesn't.
I do think even voluntary programs benefit from a stated desire to
Yeah.
set particular benchmarks around which that work focuses and relates. So if you want to take out the 5 SCMs, I don't even know what SCM stands for. I know.
Stormwater control measure.
I have no particular aversion to taking that out, but I think stating that you want to set some specific benchmarks for progress is a good idea.
Does anybody have any suggestions as to how to incorporate this educational component into the program so that we make sure it's not missed? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, we're talking about education and I wouldn't want to see us just limit it to workshops, demonstrations, for example,
Educational opportunities.
seminars. There's an annual native plant sale. What a perfect time for a presentation from, one of our North Carolina State University colleagues, for example. And if you've seen in the Black Mountain News lately, there's going to be a stormwater repair workshop in Black Mountain in March. If you haven't seen it, I can send out the link and the story. But it's my understanding that Black Mountain employs a person dealing with stormwater, and this is the kind of resource we could draw in, I would think, cooperatively.
Create a voluntary stormwater control measure program with established goals that includes educational opportunities. Do we like that one? Okay, perfect. Everyone good with that? All right, let's keep going. Number 13, work with, remember what we're doing. Excuse me, work with local, regional, and state partners to perform education and outreach efforts for flood risk mitigation. And then it lists some examples. What does everybody think about this objective? Do we think it can be combined? Do we think it should be separate? What does everyone think about combining 13 with 12? So maybe 12 could read, create a voluntary stormwater control measure program. Can create a voluntary stormwater control measure and flood risk mitigation program with established goals that includes educational opportunities.
So we're combining 11, 12, and 13.
Yeah. They are, yeah. All right, so create a voluntary stormwater control measure and flood risk mitigation program with established goals that includes educational opportunities. Are we okay with that language? Yeah. We could say educational opportunities and outreach efforts, absolutely. And outreach efforts, okay, good, good. Okay, all right. Environment 14, create pre-storm protocols for town staff and outreach efforts for residents. So yes, part of that is the outreach efforts. So the pre-storm protocols, Public Works already has these. The only thing is they're, to my knowledge, from when I talked to Barry, they're not actually formally written down, to my knowledge. Yeah. So what do we think about taking this out or leaving it in? Right.
So I have two reactions to it. One is like the town, the MRA already is involved in this to a large degree with the town, working with Public Works. And I don't know if formalizing by creating something formal would lead to, oh gosh, looks like a storm coming. So now we have to go to every creek in town. In other words, as long as there's some flexibility for the judgment of the town leadership to make it when it's necessary to establish those protocols, I'm in favor of it. But it doesn't, since it's already being done. Yeah. And I'd recommend.
Sorry about that. We're already doing it And and staff knows what they need to do during a storm and how much they know where the problem areas are, just like your people do. You know exactly where the storm problems are.
Then Kayla, is it appropriate to recommend that we strike this one?
We can strike it.
Okay, I'm gonna move that we do that.
It is
Strike.
y'all's plan and I support you in what you're doing. All right, now we are done with environment. I want to quickly, before we go to the next one, I'm gonna wait to do this at the end. Okay, we're just gonna keep going. We're just gonna keep going. I was gonna go read through them, but I'll wait till the end and we'll just go through all of them at once. 'Cause I know
If
we made a lot
anybody
of
needs to take a
changes.
break, just
Yeah.
get up and go, and then you can come right back. We'll continue.
I won't be offended. Okay. So we're moving on to development. So I just want to quickly refresh you guys. The Montreat Tomorrow vision statement for development is Montreat will be a community that respects buildings with historic value and encourages new development to be polite to the surrounding architecture. So with that in mind, we're going to start going through the objectives. So development 1, support private property owners in the creation of conservation easements and or deed restrictions on land with high recreational value to the public, such as Lake Susan. What does everyone think about that?
Would
Why
this
why are we
include,
calling out Lake Susan specifically?
would this include pass-throughs for hikes, hiking trails and stuff
Um,
on private property?
well, we haven't defined high recreational value. So it would depend on how that was defined in the plan.
I would favor not calling out any specific piece of land as the definition of high recreational value. I don't know how Richard feels about that.
I don't mind. I think what's interesting about this is I think the town has an expressed commitment to conservation. And when a private property owner wants to deed property to the town for the preservation of that from development, that could be an appropriate strategy. The tricky thing that those of us who manage property that has been conserved know is that conserved property is still an expense to the property owner. So when the town receives such property, the taxpayer has to be willing to cover the cost for things like tree removal and other costly items as they arise. In other words, it's not just a transfer of deed and everybody's happy. Owning conserved land costs money. And so I'm in favor of this because I'm in favor of conserving land in Montreat. I've already mentioned in these meetings, the MRA has a desire to conserve a healthy, substantial percentage of our currently undeveloped land for conservation. I would like to see some mechanisms to do that, but it's the kind of thing that has downstream impacts if the town were asked to take on responsibility for property.
Does anyone have any other thoughts on that? If I may make a suggestion, if the group's open to it. I would suggest removing high recreational value and then defining recreational value in the plan and also taking out the example of Lake Susan.
Unless
Because,
somebody wants to make me an offer.
well, and I think that doing this leaves it open to include things like hiking trails, and other areas like that. I don't know.
I just
Are
know
you
the
saying-
town will continue to support, the hiking trails and so forth, and Lake Susan, all the things, Richard. And the college's property also.
Were you suggesting taking out, when you said to take out high recreation, are you talking about taking out high or are you eliminating recreational as well?
Just high.
Okay.
I think Montreat has so many recreational areas that could benefit from protections as long as it's weighed with the ongoing costs of maintenance and things like that. That I think it would be beneficial to just define what recreational value is. Maybe the plan could give some examples in the actual context of the plan as what these recreational areas are. And then this goal could support the protection of those areas by, legal restrictions. So if the group is amenable to revising the language to read, support private property owners in the creation of conservation easements and or deed restrictions on land with recreational value to the public. Sound good to every, okay? You guys good with that or?
Yeah, why? I guess I'll ask Paul's question that he asked before. What's the problem? Why is this in there? And are we doing it already? Why do we need to add this?
Because things might change, John.
Yeah,
And all we're saying really is the town will support. And, you know, if MRA decides in the future, and this is arbitrary, this is off the wall, but if they decide to set up a station to charge people to hike on a trail, you know, we're gonna have to he's gonna have to talk to us, but we're in support of that. It's his private land. He can do whatever he wants to with it. Whatever his board says he can do with it. But the things change, and I think it's in there that the town needs to support those efforts. We provide no recreation in this town. MRA provides every bit of it.
Well, only thing I'd add to the Lake Susan and why it might be in there, I don't know who wrote that, so I don't know, but back in the 90s, there was a proposal that came before our board to fill in Lake Susan and develop it. And it was overwhelmingly rejected, proving that we are answerable to our community that we serve and are answerable to the public. I mean, people have sometimes ideas, they bring up ideas out of context like that. So that might be why Lake Susan was, because it literally is private property in the middle of town that is owned and, you know, zoned institutional. It is not conserved for a lake. If there's nothing that, now there may be some floodplain things. I have no idea. I'm way out over my skis here, but I think that this is here in my view, because it's making sure that our updated plan continues to value conserve property as critical to the special character that the town represents.
and this plan informs the future of land use. So we want the conservation of the protection of these spaces to be important and to carry that forward. So, okay, so we're okay with that one? Okay, and let me just note that we're gonna define recreational value in the plan. All right, development 2, please, Josh. Okay. Explore the allowance of small scale neighborhood focused businesses in the town center. So I know this is a really hot topic. And I know that there is a lot of sentiment that this is just down the street, that maybe Montreat doesn't need this type of land use. But I would offer that this objective is just an exploration. And, you know, just as someone who is a land use professional, I think exploring these topics from time to time may benefit us, because it may come out that, you know, maybe there is something that does work, but maybe there's not. And I think until we have all the information of other places, you know, of what could be contextually appropriate. I mean, this is entirely up to you guys. We can strike this if you don't like it.
Is there any cost involved with the exploration?
No.
Okay.
No, it's just the Planning and Zoning Commission directing staff, aka me,
Okay.
to look into regulations, case studies, what it would look like, what the possibilities are. What are we open to? What are we not open to? And then formalizing something to go before the Board of Commissioners for public comment. So nothing binding. This objective just leaves the door open for us to explore.
Just out of curiosity, I know that we, in 2 different times, we've had small businesses here in Montreat that no longer exist. Little green grocers, a pharmacy, gas stations, they don't exist anymore. My question would, I think the idea of exploring it would be fine. I just know that those things have not worked out in the past. And I don't know, frankly, how important I think this really is. That's just my opinion.
Does anyone else have anything else to offer?
In my opinion, the only things that would succeed in Montreat like that are those things that are sustainable through the winter. And typically, you know, small grocery store is not going to be sustained through the winter. Or nor a restaurant. We had a restaurant here at one time too. Black Eyed Susan was back behind the walk-up building, and it did all right that one summer, but after that, there's no support.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to support this. I think the exploration is fine, but I think Mari's right. Exploration will reveal those businesses aren't here anymore, not because people wanted them gone, but because there wasn't enough of a base to support them. It's just market economics.
So maybe if the group is open to leaving this in, when we look back on this plan to evaluate what's been completed, we can check that one off. Having done the exploration and say, we've determined based on XYZ, it's just not feasible.
There are businesses that probably could, but for other reasons we wouldn't. So for example, you could have a food truck park in Montreat certain days of the year if you wanted to, but they're very loud. You know, I'm not a businessman. I don't know the range of all the possible businesses that might or might not work in Montreat, but to Mari's point, it has never been a really viable option to this point for most for-profit businesses.
So what do y'all think? Do you think we leave this in or do you think we take it out?
I'm agnostic on as well. I think it's fine to leave it in. I'm not sure I would limit it to the town center.
Okay.
So Montreat. So are there viable businesses at some point somewhere in Montreat? That'd be more, that would be broader.
Does anyone have a really strong negative or positive feeling towards this goal?
The only negative would be as if by leaving it in, we create some kind of anxiety that there's some initiative afoot that will cause the mayor's phone to ring off the hook for about 3 days. That would be the only thing I can imagine would be a negative.
The only negative I can think of is in this report, public engagement. The full timers said one of the reasons they liked Montreat was lack of commercial and industrial development, 74%. 86% of the part timers also said the reason they like it, lack of commercial and industrial development. So
You guys want to take it out? That's all right. All right, so we strike that one. Okay, next one. Development 3, amend the Montreat zoning ordinance to include maximum lot coverage standard, capping the percentage of a lot that can be developed. So I looked in the comments and I do just want to offer some clarifications. We don't have a maximum lot coverage standard right now. I'm not sure what double lots mean. But this specific maximum lot coverage doesn't have to do with the number of houses on a lot. It's not density. Maximum lot coverage is talking about impervious cover. So maximum lot coverage is the amount of your lot that you could actually convert from non-impervious to impervious surface. The only areas in the town that are limited in the amount of impervious cover you can have are in the steep slope areas, which is not everywhere. So we don't currently have this. And what this would do is if we were to explore and implement something like this, it would leave more undisturbed areas in new development.
So Kayla, I think we've had this conversation at a previous meeting. Planning and zoning deals with these kinds of things at a very knowledgeable and particular level. So the verb here, amend, seems a little bit beyond my knowledge base of how this would impact development. Is there a way we could come up with like a different, explore again as is an open-ended word that gives the planning and zoning an opportunity to look at this and decide whether it's a viable thing. Because, we're basically a non-conforming community as it is in most respects, right? So what is your opinion on this particular?
Yeah, I'm in favor of maybe changing it to say investigate implementing a maximum lot coverage standard. Because I agree, I don't think because of how Highly contextual. I think the development regulations need to be in Montreat. I don't know if this is the right solution. It may be, it may not be. I don't know what the numbers are. So I do like the idea of investigating rather than amending.
I do too.
I do too, and I have a question real quick.
Yes.
One of the comments is that double lots are ruining the Montreat image. I live on a double lot. I don't know what that means.
Mari,
oh,
let's
second.
talk later. I can't answer that question right now. I have a feeling I know the answer, but you and I can talk later. Yeah. Okay, max lot coverage standard. And MZO. Okay, so investigate implementing a maximum lot coverage standard in the Montreat zoning ordinance to cap the percentage of a lot that can be developed. Does that feel better to everybody? Okay.
Good.
Okay. All right, next one.
Can I ask a question there?
Yes.
Tim, I thought we were trying to discourage these ADUs from, or people couldn't build them anymore. Is that right?
Discourage using what?
This accessory dwelling units.
You're jumping ahead a little.
Oh, sorry, I get on the wrong one.
Can I kick this off and then can we come? Okay. So development 4 is increased flexibility in the Montreat zoning ordinance for accessory dwelling units. So I just want to quickly explain to you guys how accessory dwelling units are allowed now. So right now, ADUs are currently allowed via special use permits that are issued by the Board of Adjustment in all residential zoning district. You can only have one primary dwelling on any lot, so that would be like your house. And you can pursue adding one additional accessory dwelling unit. Let's see. Yeah, so right now they all require a special use permit. They have larger setbacks from property lines than a dwelling would. They're also limited in the size that they can be, things of that nature. So the development restrictions on ADUs are definitely, I would say, more extensive than what would be average. So if that, I just leave that piece of information on the table for you guys to use in your discussion.
So we're still number 3.
No, we're number 4 now.
So back to number 3. Is number 3 residential
I
or all?
think that would be part of the examination. I don't know. I think it could be. It would depend on what that objective is seeking to support. My thought would be to have that as part of the investigation where it makes sense to have a maximum lot coverage standard. Because when you think about your zoning regulations, these are the words that result in what you see in your community. So the way we would use a maximum lot coverage standard, it would be contextual based on the location and what zoning district it would be in or what use type. And so I don't know where that would be the most appropriate because we haven't gone into it. My recommendation would be to leave it open. But you know, if you guys want to limit it to a certain use type or zoning district, we can definitely do that. Number 3, we've jumped back. Yeah.
And is 3 solving a problem? And if so, what is the problem?
Well, so I will leave you guys to discuss the problem. So the
Can
problem of no
Can anyone
maximum.
articulate the problem for number 3?
Well, I mean,
Why do we need to tighten this zoning ordinance? What's the problem?
well, I think there are 2 things. One is people who are interested in maintaining the maximum tree cover, maintaining, limiting, potential, more impermeable surfaces would want to do so by limiting the percentage of a lot that could be developed. As a practical matter, they would, I think, planning and zoning would go zone by zone and look at this. So they would come up with one standard for residential. They would come up with one standard for institutional. They would come up with one standard for RI and IR and so forth, right? I mean, that's generally what you would do.
We could do it by zoning district. We could do it by use type.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it'll depend on what is the best way forward when we start looking at how other places do this.
Right.
And remember, the word is investigate the Montreat zoning ordinance. So it's all.
No, the language is amend.
We changed
Okay,
it.
sorry. I missed.
Yeah, we
My
did.
apologies.
Investigate implementing a maximum lot coverage standard in the Montreat zoning ordinance to cap the percentage of a lot that can be developed.
Thank you. My apologies.
May,
Okay.
may I add then, in addition to what Richard said about impervious surfaces and water runoff, I'm thinking about what you might call the view shed. In terms, what do adjacent property owners nearby or across the valley see? And I'm thinking maybe we need to consider not only the horizontal extent of coverage, but the vertical extent. What's the height of a building, as well as what's the amount of land that it covers?
I have a suggested objective to kind of address that, but I want to talk about that at the end. So hold on to that because I want to come back to that. Okay, are we okay to move back to development 4? Okay. Someone was starting the discussion about 80.
We talked about the additional dwellings or the accessory dwelling units. I think the zoning board has already addressed that and I would just soon strike this whole thing because they're well aware of, and have put limitations on the accessory dwelling units.
So
I think strike it because it brings attention to this and we just need to leave it out. Would be a better plan.
is the desire to not allow ADUs as additional options for housing? Or is it to allow, you don't want them?
Maggie says yes.
She says doesn't.
That's what you said, yes. That's my point. I agree. Yeah. That's right. Exactly. To me, this is a puzzling issue because when I read the 2008 plan, it sounded to me like it was encouraging the development of more ADUs because it was interested in having people develop their property in ways that would increase the property value of the property, which would help the tax base, which would help our revenue challenge. It seems like since the 2008 plan was developed, the council has moved actually in a direction away from that and towards more restrictive language on the use of and approval of ADUs. And what I think we're hearing is the council, this group appreciates that move more than it appreciates what was in the 2008 plan. Is that a fair characterization of how things have moved since 2008? Caleb
think
and
so.
Others?
I think so.
Does the rest of the group feel that that's accurate?
I think the statement is Montreat's about full now. We don't need any ADUs along with it.
Well, personally, I mean, as a homeowner, I agree with you. As a conference center director, more ADUs are good for us because more rental property. Another thing that's happening in Montreat is our volume of rental property is dropping. And so the more rental property, the better for our mission and ministry. But I'm not here to speak up for them. This is not a ditch I want to die in by any means. But I am noticing that I am curious to know, given the fact that we've moved in that direction, where did this come out of the survey? Who is recommending?
These,
questions came directly.
yeah,
Okay, so. But it wasn't reduce flexibility, it said increase. And so sounds like we're all just let's just leave it as it is for now is what we're saying, right?
that's,
Strike, that's what I'm saying,
Not right, yeah.
striking it,
yeah.
leaving the current policies in place and not making a recommendation.
Okay, so everyone's okay with removing that? Yes? No? Yeah, removing it? Yeah, okay. All right, development 5. Develop add educational signage for landmarks and streams. So I will say, that there was a 2014 wayfinding plan done, but it was never implemented. And so I don't know if, now I know that some of the concerns listed in, the bullets are, don't spoil the wilderness experience. We don't need a lot of signs. But there were some other things in there, that, we need educational signage. What about the signs that are already there? So if the group is open to it, I do have a suggested change. And you guys strike this if you want, I will not be offended. Develop and implement a wayfinding plan, including educational and landmark signage. And the reason I say a plan is because it would be contextual. It wouldn't be willy-nilly, we'll put a sign up anywhere. It would be, this is how we want wayfinding to be done in the town. This is where we think it's appropriate. This is what we think it should look like. Things of that nature. So I'll leave that to you guys.
The only thing I would like to add to that is some sort of verbiage that directs it to planning and zoning to look at it,
Yeah, who would do this and how would it be done and who would
because there's an
supervise
existing
it?
ordinance.
Yeah, so there is an existing plan. I think it was done by the community.
It was.
So it could either again be done by the community or an outside consultant could be hired to do it. I guess it depends how to move forward. I think if we had a group of citizens that was really interested in pursuing this, that would be a great option. Yeah.
So Kayla, when I read this, I didn't think this was wayfinding. I thought this was something like a sign that says, this is Flat Creek and some, educational information about it. I think there is something down on the gate trail right now. It's really old. You can hardly read it, but I thought that's what this was. Not the wayfinding.
More informational, except for the rock that's painted every year. There's really not a lot of informational signs in the valley.
Is informational and educational signage something that we feel the town wants?
It used to be one next to the post office. And I saw people, right on Montreat Road and or Assembly Drive. I think if they're done well, people come out here from all over the place and
Yeah.
then something I don't think you need to overload it, but I think in the core of Montreat proper, not the wilderness, you ought to have. I think I'll call you at 2 a.m. on this one.
How about something that says working in cooperation with or consulting with the college and MRA and the town in developing a wayfinding plan? Because so much of it's to the college, so much of it's to MRA facilities. The educational portion of it, if we put up educational signs on a lot of this stuff, we'd be putting it on private property. And they've got to be able to tell us that we can do that.
And I would say that the wayfinding plan, I believe that plan can include provisions for educational signage. So we could have it all as one piece so that it's all done cohesively. There would be standards for what it would look like, what the size would look like. There's something written in the sign ordinance that says if signs are a part of a wayfinding plan, they have a much easier approval process. So we could certainly, I know there is an objective about a wayfinding plan, wayfinding signs later on, but we could just have one objective that says exactly what the mayor said, work in cooperation with the town, college, and MRA to develop a wayfinding plan.
I think this would be something that the Heritage Center would really, really appreciate. That is a gold mine that people walk past clubs and everything. So, and they're screaming for some kind of sign direction on the front of the building.
So what about work in cooperation with the town, college, MRA, and local organizations to develop a wayfinding, to develop and implement a wayfinding sign plan? Does that sound okay to everybody? Yeah. Yeah, wayfinding is like directional signage. But part of that you can build, I believe you can build into a wayfinding sign plan, essentially a sign plan.
Maggie, it's like, if you have a complaint about the college, it's this way to the president's
Yeah.
office.
Yeah.
That's wayfinding. Yeah.
That, I think that would be part of it. I think we could put educational in that.
Yeah, I think that the educational component is almost more important than how to get to the assembly in cafeteria, eating place.
And I do think that having them all together is really important so that it's contextual and that we're not overwhelming with signs, and so that they're placed in intelligent locations and that they're consistent, because that can have a positive or negative impact on the community character. And so if we do it in a plan, I think it could be well done. So, and I think we'd put everything in there. Wait, what do you mean?
That educational and wayfinding.
Yeah, we can.
To, in support of the public that, comes here.
So we can say work in cooperation with the town, college, MRA, and local organizations to develop and implement a wayfinding plan, including educational signage.
I think it's a shame that C.R. Anderson's marker is underneath hydrangea bushes, personally.
What did I just see this past week that had signs proposed for it down by Lookout Road, that were wayfinding? What was
The
that?
MRA is replacing the sign that's on, I think it's Assembly Drive. Yeah, it's
Assembly.
between Lookout and Assembly Circle. And the way the code is written, they have to get approval from the board because it's within the public right of way.
I was curious because I
Yeah.
thought it looked really good.
The one that's right before you get to Lookout Bridge has been deteriorating for some years. It's, and we've got to, because it's in the right of way, we need to have is it a variance or not sure. It's got to go before the town.
Has to
itself.
go, you have to get Board of Commissioners approval because it's in the right of way. It's a whole thing.
We've got a real neon option that we want to propose.
You guys can come speak out
Sorry.
against it on Thursday.
Yeah, well, I'll tell Tanner.
New cafe and store too.
Pardon? New cafe, yeah. Yeah, new CVS to the right.
All right, so in the interest of time, we're going to keep moving forward. Development 6, this feels like implementation to me. Would y'all agree? So we'll strike that. All right, moving on to community character. Just as a reminder, the vision statement for community character is Montreat's community will honor the rich historic character of its built environment and preserve the beauty of its mountain surroundings, taking into account the need for resilience in the face of a changing climate. So community character 1 says, explore the creation of a public art program that encourages public art in public areas and in new non-residential development projects. Is this something you guys want? Okay, we'll take this out. Okay, that was an easy one. Okay, community character 2, establish a new committee or empower the Open Space Conservation Committee or similar group to work with private property owners in nominating historic structures and or landmarks to the National Registry of Historic Places.
Do we have a committee working?
Can we suggest that a committee be formed for this purpose?
Implementation,
Yes. Okay.
we can do that. Do you guys like this goal?
But some people
No.
really do.
I
You don't
think
like
it's
this
gonna
goal?
cause a lot of problems, frankly.
Simply because town council is a time. Private, public. Property owner has every right to do with the property they want. You start declaring something historic. Want to tear it down, but do something that's what they're doing. I've had a bad experience with historic districts. Declaring something historic.
You are hogtied with what you can do. Well, your own property. They tell you what you can and cannot do. and it's-
Well, and when it becomes historic, either, if the property owner doesn't want to keep it up, deteriorates and it's historic, who's going to take care of it? The town's sure not going to. We're not going to do that. I don't know. Paul, do
I
you?
would support striking this.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not in favor of the historic district because I've had problems myself, but I'll just say the feedback we got, there is a vocal group who would like to do this so I don't know what we do about that. What's that?
Or want to supervise other people's property or tell them what they can or cannot do with what they own. And there's always friction with that. But what if we formed a committee that just suggests, or something that would just be guidelines, nothing enforceable?
It makes sense to me to do something like this, like Savannah has done this, Charleston has done this, but they've done it very intentionally for the purpose of revenue. They've done it for tourism. If Montreat wants to move in the direction of getting more and more tourists in here, touring historic homes and buildings, and like actually create a tourist district, this seems to be a rational idea to me. But short of that, I don't understand why Montreat would want to do this to itself.
Well, in the survey, the constituents did not want more tourism in Montreat, as I remember. Right?
It's a double-edged sword. Because I'm all in favor of protecting things like Winlithia and the debacle about Winlithia a year or so ago. It had no protection whatsoever. But at the same time, I don't want my house to be in a historic district. So it's a big double-edged sword. I wish there were more protections of some things, but
the way the state has regulated
Yeah.
what we can and can't do with the design of buildings, unless you're in a historic district, really limits us in terms of what we can enforce. We can make suggestions, but we can't enforce unless we're in a historic district.
Can we do something like Maggie proposed where this is a voluntary thing?
They seem to have worded it where work with private property owners in nominating historic structures. In other words, that says to me that you just can't go out and pick your house, Maury, and say it's a historic structure. They've got to work with you and ask you whether you want it to be a historic structure or not.
Well, I think there's two, I hear kind of two different things here. We have the actual nomination of historic structures, and then we have voluntary design guidelines-esque. Is that right?
I
That's what-
like the voluntary part of it.
So that's okay. And so just to be clear, that's not something that the town could officially put out. That would have to be something that is not affiliated with the town, because we cannot state law.
Right.
Yeah, I just want to be clear that that's not something that the town
Well,
can do.
if this can't be a town objective, then I don't
I
think
don't
if
think
it,
so.
we can't do it.
I agree, because it seems to me if I want to start a historic group in Montreat, I can do it without going through the town.
Maybe the Heritage Center is the place to start that. Seems more applicable.
So we do have, just before we finish on community character 2, we do have community character 3, which says support current and new activities with local, regional, and state partners to educate the public about the value of historic properties and landmarks. So, maybe that's a suggestion that could be made outside of this plan in support of that objective. I would not want to formalize that recommendation, but it could be something done
Independently.
in
Okay.
support of that community
Yeah.
character 3.
Okay.
So we're going to strike community character 2. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. I don't know. Three feels Three feels a little, three feels a kind of harmless because Montreat does have a really amazing historic, history. And so I think having opportunities to educate people about that history and why it's important, doesn't feel too terrible to me, but again, it's y'all's plan. So,
I'm good with 3.
you guys are okay. Now, I will say that I did, want to revise language in community character 3 to say, instead of look for opportunities, I would just say support current and new activities with local, regional, and state partners to educate the public about the value of historic properties and landmarks. What do you guys think about that language? I know there are existing activities going on and I don't want to discount those. Okay, so we'll leave that. All right. Number 4. What was that? Okay, going on to community character 4. I think we already do this.
This is operational.
All right, community character 5. This is about an accessibility audit. Is this something that the town wants?
We've already done our facilities, so this would be the public facilities. Guess that's, well, this is, but it's just been built.
I would strike 5.
Okay. All right, community character 6. Work with local and regional partners to improve the bicycle and pedestrian environment by installing bike parking, park benches, and other basic amenities through the town and at the trailheads. I know that bikes are a really hot topic. But I think that this one should be removed because there's a place for it in the transportation objectives. If we want to keep anything about bicycles, which we will get to. But I think that as far as it being in community character and transportation, I think we take it out of community character. So
I agree with that, but I have a suggestion that anywhere we find something in here and we're talking about bikers, bikers does not mean cyclists to me.
you
And
think,
I think cyclist is the right word because biker is something totally different.
bicycle and pedestrian is,
Yes.
that's the terminology used in planning to describe non-motorized forms of transportation. So we can say bicycles when we're talking, but I don't think changing it to cyclists, I think
Well,
it's,
there were a number of places when I was reading in some of this where they referred to bikers. And I was just suggesting that we might not want to use that term.
that's fine. We can get that.
As somebody who lives on the Booty Loop in Charlotte, bikers are a huge nuisance. Huge. It's called the Booty Loop in Charlotte, and they raise hundreds of thousands of dollars in the summer, but they are a huge nuisance.
So
Huge.
do we have time for one more?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Community character 7 is to look for private-public partnership opportunities to fund and support trail maintenance.
We support when y'all, I mean, they've got a grant request out now that we've supported. So we support when they go for trails and
So should we leave this in?
Yeah.
As a support?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, going back to bikers, Tim, are bikes excluded from the trails or not? I don't know. I mean,
that's not mine. That's Richard's.
You talking about the trails in the wilderness?
any trails.
Well, I can't speak to the trails like the ones up and down, Montreat Road, that the town's trails, but there's some trails in the wilderness that are available for mountain biking. Most are not. So if you think of the Mitchell Toll Road, I'm saying this from memory, not, this is worth what you're paying for it. But I believe, say, the Mitchell Toll Road is available for bikes to use. Lookout Trail, Graybeard Trail are not open to biking. Only basically the former roads that are up there. Those are the ones that bikes are allowed on. Doesn't mean they don't go on those other trails, but they're not supposed to be on them.
So we're going to try to just push through this. What let's go on to transportation. The vision statement, Montreat will be accessible for people as they age, safe for children and families, and calm for those driving, bicycling, and walking. I'm just reviewing the vision for transportation. So we're going on to transportation 1. If someone wants to give the page number for that, because mine are different.
13.
This we have already put under a different objective. So I say remove it. Okay. All right, transportation 2. Calm traffic and lower speeds by partnering with regional transportation agencies to conduct a study of feasible options. This plan may include, but is not limited to, posting advanced warning signs, seasonal speed tables, additional stop signs. What do you guys think about this?
That's sort of an ongoing thing, but I did hear that a good bit during the public meetings that people wanted the traffic slowed down, and we're doing our best.
Okay, so we'll leave that one in. Okay. Transportation 3, conduct a parking circulation access study to assess need for overflow trail parking.
Would this cost any money?
Parking circulation and access study would. I mean,
I hate to pay for money to people, for people to come in and overload our trails, which they're already doing. But they're here. I know that.
We've already done this in respect that up on Oklahoma. Didn't we open up some additional parking up there, Richard, in cooperation with y'all? So we're still working on that. That's a constant thing
now I do, oh, sorry, go ahead,
No, it's
Richard.
okay. If I can just speak to that, I mean, it is a thorny problem, and we recognize that we've got real problems with parking at the base of Lookout Trail and at the base of Graybeard Trail. The challenge is, how do you make private property available to the public, but only a portion of the public? In other words, I can't construct a law that allows the people who live on Kanawha Drive or, yeah, just to pick a road out of the air, or Virginia Road. Yes, exactly. That doesn't also allow the public, the rest of the public. And so we are in conversation with the town about this. We answer every time David Arndt, our police chief, wants to sit down and talk about this. And we're open to any ideas people might have to make sure that we use our trails responsibly. But when we conserve those trails and conserve that area, it came with a certain amount of obligation to some degree that we make them available in the way that we have. So we're going to continue to figure on this problem until we can figure out the right solution.
It's an ongoing thing. So
We should revise the language to just read, conduct a parking circulation access study to assess the current and future need for parking.
I guess my question is, do we actually need a study? Because this is being addressed on a regular basis. Do you need to spend the money for a study?
I don't think so.
No, and that's why does anyone have any suggestions for language that would,
It's operational. So I mean,
I think
can
it
you
needs,
eliminate it because it's
I
operational?
think it needs, my opinion is this needs to be in the plan because this is a concern.
And continue to monitor the challenges, blah, blah, blah.
But this is one of the big things we heard in the community
Yeah.
feedback sessions. We need
Let
a
me-
traffic study. Is there a traffic study for the lodge? Is there a traffic study for the new dorm? People are looking for that
If y'all,
because a lot of people think, hey, we're bursting at the seams right now. We don't, and why do we want to make that problem worse? So I think we need to address it. Otherwise, people are going to wonder why it's not in the plan.
so I would really love to get through the next objective. So if you guys will allow me, I will work on some language and come back to you to how we can have this in there without making it require a study. Does that sound okay? Okay. All right. Transportation 4, work with local and regional partners to explore the implementation of an on-street parking payment system. Do you guys want this? Is this something important to the town? Is this a strategy that we want to use?
My only, clearly I know very little about parking, but it seems like some of what the consultant's recommendations are going at it piecemeal. Parking for the trails, and so forth. Is it not possible to have one comprehensive package that helps us to address all of our traffic and parking issues in one fell swoop?
Costs a lot of money. It really does.
Yeah.
Bill. But we're addressing the parking up on Lookout right now. We'll be talking about that at our next council meeting. In Montreat, to park on the road, if you have two wheels off of the road, you're considered legally parked. What gets me is when I walk around town and I see these signs across the street from where somebody lives saying so-and-so private parking. Well, they don't own the property. So those are the people I'd love to see pay money for where they're parking. I mean, they've got full excess pulling off. So yeah, we're going to study it, but it's a piecemeal thing. It's very expensive to do it all.
And I will say that I think that doing it piecemeal kind of calls out these individual pain points. I think it's entirely possible it could be looked at as one big thing. It doesn't have to be looked at as piecemeal, but it's good, I think, to call out the pressure points. So I will come back with number 3, transportation 4, we're striking that. Yes. Parking payment, we are not interested in that. Okay, transportation 5, a freight plan. So this was something that was actually in the 2008 plan. What do you all think about this?
Where are you going to weigh the vehicle?
I don't know.
It really is a can of worms to me. We have a good bit of off truck loading right now, right over here. 18 wheelers are not allowed in Montreat, even though they get there somehow some days, but they're not allowed. And our streets that we're building now are good streets that hold up over a period of time. A lot of the old streets, and I'm not throwing off on MRA, Richard, but years ago, they used to pave over dirt. There was no base to them. So every street we do now, we grind up and put a good 6-inch base of rock down before we pave over it. So I think the streets are going to hold up. Some of them aren't, but and that they're old and they don't have a good base on them, and we'll get to those. Like Richard, I don't know how to put a weight limit on trucks. I really don't. We can investigate it. I think that's the best thing to do is investigate it, and I'll get some of the commissioners involved in investigating that.
So maybe we change language to investigate developing.
Yeah, I think that would do it. If that suits y'all, for us to investigate developing. Okay.
Tim, question. My cousin had to have a lot of dirt removed when she recently did some renovation, a lot of dirt, big dirt. And it tore up the road pretty significantly, and she paid for the repair of that road. Is that the way it usually works? If one individual does that?
Well, if they damage the road, then yes.
Okay,
But we're talking about just normal wear and tear.
I know, but was just curious about that.
We've got one little section that we're going to repave, but we're going to wait until this house gets finished before we repave it, because it's just going to get torn up right now if we repave it.
Okay, last objective. This one says expand bike and pedestrian infrastructure in priority areas according to the town's bike and pedestrian plan. Now, before we start talking about bicycles, I just want to say that the town has a bicycle, pedestrian, and greenways master plan. It is from 2008. I would imagine that a lot of the ideas in there are outdated. So my suggestion, just something to keep in mind while y'all talk about this, is to revise this objective to say, update and implement the town's bicycle, pedestrian, greenways master plan. That way, anything that's done is done with a comprehensive look at the town. And when we talk about pedestrians and greenways, we're talking about places you can walk, places you could have your nephew ride a scooter, not be in the road, things like that, and have it be a system that is interconnected. So I will leave you all to that.
So again, I have a question here. It looks to me like in reading the 2008 plan that the plan wanted to promote the use of bicycles in Montreat. Given that it's a retirement community 9 months of the year, I don't think it's likely to be a wave that crashes over us anytime soon, though there are people, myself included, who enjoy biking in Montreat.
Which is why my suggestion is to update it.
Yeah, to me, I was surprised that people don't want more bikes. I don't know that there's a problem with the number of bikes we have now. Is there a problem? So we just need to update the plan.
The main complaint I hear is that no one uses the bicycle lane. It's used for a jogging lane. And the college kids prefer it. And I don't mind that. I think it's great that they're using it. But, that's some of the people, just people in Montreat.
I would love to know what the community thinks today and what we want to see as part of this comprehensive look at non-motorized transportation. Walking. I don't know.
Also, the bikes that come into Montreat, you can't ride them on the sidewalk from Black Mountain to Montreat.
They
Can
ride
you?
in the road.
They ride in the road and then they ride into Montreat. Okay.
That would be my understanding.
That's how they do.
So are we okay with amending this language to update
Yes.
and implement the plan? Okay.
Yes.
Now, before we end, I have a suggested goal. So when I was going through this plan or suggested objective, when I was going through this plan, the one thing that I really found just from a zoning perspective is that there really wasn't anything in here that I found that would lend itself to growth management in terms of the zoning regulations. We talked a little bit about this with the erosion and sediment control plan, the stream regulations, things of that nature. But personally, as someone who's going to work with this plan, I would love to see something that's a little bit more solid in terms of really evaluating our current regulations as to, are they contextual? Do they support the plan? Do they work for Montreat? So what I propose is adding an objective that reads, preserve, protect, and enhance the character of Montreat by evaluating and improving existing allowable uses and dimensional regulations in each zoning district. So what that means is that we would look at what is allowed, what's not allowed, what requires a special use permit in each zoning district. And we'd also look at things like setback, building height, things of that nature in each zoning district, and look at the plan and say, is the purpose of this zoning district and the goal of the plan, is it being supported by the rules we have in place? So I would put that suggestion forward to the group.
I like it.
I like it a lot.
Can you read the language again?
Preserve, protect, and enhance the character of Montreat by evaluating and improving existing allowable uses and dimensional regulations in each zoning district. And I will say that the consultant's response to that was that we think this is great. That typically a plan would describe what these changes would be, but we've heard from the committee that we don't want to get into this level of detail with consensus at this time, which I agree with. We think this should be included in the plan.
Could you define dimensional uses?
Dimensional regulations.
Regulations.
So we have permitted uses and dimensional regulations.
What's that?
So the uses are what's allowed. So for example, in the R1 zoning district, you can have a single family dwelling. Dimensional regulations are your setbacks, how far your building has to be from each property line, the height, fences, well, maybe not fences, but setbacks and height and things of that nature.
So support it. My question relates to a previous, I can't remember what we did with the previous thing around density on lots, percentage density, percentage development of lots, but doesn't that fall under this?
So maximum lot coverage would,
Yeah, so why wouldn't that be a why wouldn't that be something studied under this particular goal? Because that obviously affects
Yeah,
growth and
maximum-
development.
yeah, maximum lot coverage, we could certainly take that piece out and put it under this objective. I do like having it explicitly called out because I think that is a point of pressure, like what I talked about with having the parking and the speeding called out separately in separate goals. We can certainly do them at the same time. It's just explicitly calling attention to one specific area of concern.
Right.
So we can put them together
Yeah.
or we don't have to.
So before I vote on this, can we vote on it at the next meeting and have you send us the language so I can have a chance to look at it and just sort of figure out exactly what it is you're asking us to consider? Because I'm very much in favor
Yeah.
of studying
Yeah, and that's
the
why-
implications of this.
And I will tell y'all that after working in Montreat for the last 6 months. I do think that we do need to look at the regulations. We really want to make sure that the rules we have are supporting what we want to see in Montreat. And I know sometimes as someone who's administering the ordinance, sometimes I run up against some issues in the contextual nature of the ordinance because we have such small lot sizes. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to put this in here is because it would give us the opportunity and the direction to examine the ordinance. And really make sure that we are implementing these words are actually going to show up in what we see on the ground. I don't. I think it's, unless you guys feel it is, I think this is okay. But it certainly, if you guys wanted to, I don't know how we'd make it stronger.
This is something that's important to me. Everybody else may hate it. I don't care. But you were talking about growth management. My concern is how much more growth Montreat Valley can bear. And I think that what you're talking about is in the same general area of what I'm talking about. But I would like to see something that tells us how close we are to the edge.
I don't think that's something that can be generated. We know how much property is left undeveloped. But as far as, yeah, I mean, I don't know how we would come up with that.
Well, my idea was to do some kind of environmental study, and I don't even know how feasible that is. But I know that Montreat's resources are not infinite, and we have to, at some point, think far enough ahead to know what's going to be reasonable growth and what's not. And I'm just putting that out there because I think it's important.
All right, I understand what you're saying. I don't know what you say by our resources are not infinite. We can drill more wells. We can pave more streets. The water and sewer, I mean, sewer is provided by the metropolitan sewer districts, and they've certainly not capped our capacity. There are still a lot of unsold lots that are developable in Montreat. So I don't know how to answer that. Paul's still growing. Richard's trying to grow. So I don't know. I think we'll know when we reach it. And I
don't want us to reach it and go past it.
how are we going to stop it? How are you going to stop growth when people own a lot and you're not going to allow them to build on it?
Well,
Because
that's not exactly what I'm saying.
well, you're talking about limiting growth in the future if we're close to capacity. It's like, I don't know what you're looking for, and I don't know how to get there.
Well, maybe I don't know how to get there either, but it still is a concern because I do think Montreat's resources are finite, and that includes water. We can't just say, okay, well, we need another well. We'll just dig another well. Sooner or later, it's just not going to work that way. And that may be 100 years from now, but sometimes you have to look pretty far in the future.
If I may, Mari, I do think that part of this growth management objective, why don't we put in there density? Why don't we put in their density? Because I really don't think that we can put a figure on capacity. But I think maybe looking at density in each of the zoning districts.
And I'm not looking for a figure, but density is the word that I've been using all along. And I think that it would be good to have.
So would
number.
examining, so when we talk about this objective, preserve, protect, and enhance the character of Montreat by evaluating and improving existing allowable uses, density, and dimensional regulations in each zoning district. What that means is that what I would anticipate doing, because it will be me, is to go into each zoning district and we talk about what's happening in there, what's built, what's not built, what do the current regulations visually create when it's built. And I think that certainly concerns about capacity, impacts of additional development, we could certainly talk about that in those conversations. So does that feel
That feels,
okay?
yes, it feels better. And I'm glad to add that one word.
Okay, so if the rest of the group is okay with that, and I will send this language to y'all.
I'll just speak to both Maury and Tim's points. I certainly give you, Kayla, a vote of confidence to sort of poke around in this area. You're the professional in the room, and from what little bit I know, you'll start to address things like limiting factors, carrying capacity, and then the classic smart growth.
Yes. And I did smart growth, I think it would be interesting to add those smart growth principles into these conversations. I just didn't want to put it as an objective because I think it's a little bit limiting. And I think a lot of it will be contextual to Montreat. So we have one piece left. We have implementation.
Okay.
How
How long will it take to get that one piece done?
I would say less than an hour.
Have you got one more meeting in you guys?
Okay.
For an hour? And then we'll wind this thing up.
And what I'm going to do in the meantime is I'm going to send y'all a revised list of objectives containing this last growth management one. And then when we meet again, you guys give me the final okay. And I want you guys to think about, are there any pieces you see that are missing from this list? Yeah.
That assumptions list, I don't know that we need specific agenda time to talk about it. But as I said a couple of meetings back, this plan's power to communicate the character of the place is as important as it is to reflect it. And so those are kind of different, right? So we reflect it through some of the comments we got from the surveys and so forth. But we also have an opportunity to say, this is actually what's happening here. You have what you perceive to be happening. This is what's been happening over the last 15 years since the last plan was developed. And so therefore we're offering this plan as an update and amendments to that plan. And that's where I'm going to get into some of that when I look at those assumptions, because I do think there's some other assumptions embedded in the 2008 plan that we haven't called out yet and ought to inform us so we can inform the community.
So we may need a little more than an hour.
All of you got your calendar available?
I think if Richard and the rest of the group, does 30 minutes feel adequate to maybe cover some of those assumptions that Richard's talking about, make sure that we've hit the community concerns? Because I'll set a timer. Mari's on my board of adjustment, so she knows.
I do want to say this before we decide what we're going to do. I think that that you have made this now a quantum leap in efficiencies and clarity.
Definitely.
Thank you.
And it's very, very encouraging.
You're here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I think if we do this is my thought, and you guys please respond. Maybe 20-30 minutes to just talk about those assumptions. Maybe I want to say 20 minutes for the final approval of objectives. If you guys, when I send this list to you, if you guys have changes or any additional ideas that you guys feel we need to include, send those to me in advance so that I can look at them and see you know, how we should go about that. And I'll give y'all like a deadline to do that. And then an hour to do implementation.
May I suggest a date?
Oh,
February 20th, Monday, from 10:30 a.m. to noon. Feb 20.
I am not in Montreat on Mondays. So Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and I
I'm out
will
of town the rest of the week.
clear my schedule for you guys. Oh, I will actually be at a workshop. You know what, for you guys, I will come in on the 20th and I will move my schedule around. So, if
sure
you,
you can do that?
yes, I can do that.
Okay.
I'll block it off and I'll,
What time on the 20th?
I'm suggesting 10:30 a.m. to noon.
10:30 to noon. Think we can do it?
I think so,
Okay.
on
Okay.
February 20th. Oh, that's not February. Okay, so next time, we're gonna talk about really briefly the assumptions, do a final approval of the objectives. If you guys can send me your any ideas, any additional pieces you think are missing. Should we choose that?
Yeah, I can go later than that. Sure.
Okay.
12 to 1:30 that day.
Yep, I will make that happen. From noon to 1:30. Right? Okay, so by no later than February 15th at 5 o'clock, y'all need to send me any comments you have, any ideas about the objectives, and I'm going to send you guys this right after the meeting so that you guys can go ahead and get started. Okay,
Thanks.
Thank
thanks,
you.
everybody.
Got a motion to adjourn? Have a motion, for
job.
John Casper to adjourn. Have a second?
Second.
Second from Dr. Mauer. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're